Thank you for joining us here at the ThunderCast. I am, as always, your host, Lyle Convoy, and with me I have Mark Pellegrini, aka Pellecreepy,
Oh,
number one Marmaduke fan,
Howdy, everybody.
and Couchboy.
Hey guys, thanks for joining.
All right, so thank you to all who have joined us in the chat so far. We have King Hissy, John Caulfield, and Kecker's Boy. Hopefully, more people will pile in here shortly. We're going to go ahead and cover the following topics today. We're going to cover the episodes Mandora and the Pirates. We're going to cover the episode Return of the Driller. We're going to go in a character retrospective of Claudus, and we're going to talk about the Wildstorm Thundercats Dogs of War Part 1 and 2. Hello, Vinkman. So, real quick before we get into this, we know everything's kind of, bedlam outside, and there's a lot of talk to be done about police, but this podcast is about Thundercats, about the property they're in. So we're going to ask that the chat not try to make parallels here in reality. We're going to focus on the actual fiction of the cop that is Mandora. The only thing I will say attributed to that is I think we'd be better off in general if we had more cops like Mandora. That's all I'm going to say on that matter. We're going to keep this politics free. We're just going to move on into this. So let's go ahead, and who wants to start us off on a discussion about Mandora and the Pirates? Do we have any takers?
Well, Mark, you're kind of the man who loves Mandora. Do you want to take this one?
I am the man who loves Mandora, and I don't know anybody who doesn't love Mandora. So yes, I would like to. I mean, yes, thank you. So, Mandora and the Pirates. I wasn't here on the ThunderCast when you did the first Mandora episode, Mandora the Evil Chaser. So I'm glad that I'm here to do the second one, because Mandora and the Space Pirates, or Mandora and the Pirates, is actually one of my favorite episodes. Mandora is one of my favorite characters. But the plot of this one is that Mandora pulls over a space barge out in outer space and meets Captain Cracker. And let's get the laughing out of the way for the name Captain Cracker. All right, everybody okay? All right.
You should have seen my friend's Discord server when I showed him a picture, and they're like, "Hey guys, guess what this guy's name is?"
Captain Cracker was my nickname when I played the high school basketball team.
Oh my god.
But she pulls over Captain Cracker, and he takes her hostage to a prison planet. I think they call it a penal planet, or was that something from Silverhawks? I don't know. But let's get the laughs out of the way for penal planet. All right, we're all
I
done.
believe it was the Gray Prison Planet.
Gray Prison Planet. Yeah, penal planet was from Silverhawks. My bad. So they take her there, and Lion-O has to go up and save her. And he goes up to the prison planet and teams up with Quick Pick, who was from the first Mandora episode, who's been undergoing reformation on the prison planet. And they have to team up to first they save Mandora, then they have to stop Captain Cracker, who's freed all the prisoners and has taken them down to Third Earth for a massive raid on Third Earth, and so they have to stop them. And it's a really exciting episode. Well, first, it's really well animated. I mean, most Thundercats episodes look really good, but this one looks like really, really good. They put a lot of work on this one, and there's a lot of little details just in the not just the character animation, but in their posing that it's across a lot of personality without them really having to say or do anything. I think the best example is at the beginning, and at first Mandora doesn't know who Captain Cracker is, and so she's in the cockpit with him, and she gets an emergency call from Lion-O, who basically tells her Mandora, you're in danger. Captain Cracker is an evil pirate. And then Captain Cracker shoves her out of the way and destroys the radio. And he looks over at her, and she's just standing in the corner with her arms folded, looking at him really disapprovingly. it's just so good. She's like, "Oh, you're in trouble now."
Yeah.
And just little moments like that are so cool. And I like Quick Pick. I like the way he takes his little tong hands and will lift his hat up. He's kind of menacing, but he's not a bad guy. His voice sounds like a Jonathan Harris impression, like Dr. Smith from Lost in Space. He's kind of got that. He's pathetic, but he's also kind of schemy. And there's just so many great details on the characters in the episode. The beginning, Snarf's at the beginning. And as soon as he sees the galleon on the cat's layer radar, he tells Lion-O the make and the model of the ship, because he's old and he can remember when those ships were in fashion, and he recognizes the sign on the ship, as the Jolly Rogers, and recognizes that it's Captain Cracker's ship. And it's plays a small part in the episode, but it's a really good representation of Snarf as a character, of what he's good at, that he's old and he's wise. He's got a Jaga, but he's been around the block more than the other Thundercats, and he has this great reservoir of information. So he's the one who tells Lion-O, like, oh crap, tell Mandora that she's in trouble. That's Captain Cracker's ship. He gets the episode rolling. It's just the characterizations all throughout the episode are really on point. Even Quick Pick, who I don't know if he ever makes an appearance after this one, but he's still that he's not exactly trustworthy, but he is going through reformation on the prison planet, so he's not exactly a bad guy. It's just a really well done episode. It's very tense. It's very action packed. The characterization's on point. The animation's good. It's just one of the all time best episodes. That's all I gotta say. Door's hot. So I said it on Twitter. Mandora is what I imagined Samus Aran was like as a kid, because back in the late 80s, early 90s, there wasn't a whole lot of destroyed media. There was just the games, and the games were very abstract 8 and 16-bit games. I never read the Valiant Captain N comics, because where the hell was I going to find a Valiant comic back in the 90s? But like when I saw Mandora, I was like, oh, that's totally what Samus Aran is like. Is an evil chaser, a bounty hunter, and she goes around fighting space pirates, and she totally is this blonde chick with a John Wayne voice. Like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and that was true. So I mean,
all right, who wants to go next?
I want to add something to what Mark said about the animation of this episode. I feel like in some episodes they highly animate like a couple key action scenes, and I feel like in this one they sort of evenly distributed the really good animation, so it kind of overall feels like an excellent episode. It also feels like one of the more Star Wars inspired episodes, even like to the fact that it has really quick pacing. It even has like the opening with a giant ship moving away from the camera. I'll just add a couple little things that I noticed. Like there's some really great sequences with like Mandora's face being lit up. I noticed the same thing about Quick Pick, doing little mannerisms with his hat. And I like the redemption angle that he gets let out of prison by accident, and Captain Cracker realizes, wait a second, this guy's trying to be reformed. That means we can use him to as a hostage to get Mandora to surrender. They kind of like almost torture him by like trying to take off his robotic arms. So there's like a nice, I don't know, like establishing danger and establishing the evil of Captain Cracker's pirates in a way that isn't like too traumatizing for children. Mandora almost gets boiled in oil, and the whole prison planet feels really detailed. I love it, like especially where they're running down the hallway, and the whole hallway is animated, and they're running towards the light. Like they'll draw like the panels and everything. They give it a really authentic, far away kind of space station feel.
All right, I think that's pretty solid. How about you, Couch?
Yeah, another thing I'd like to expand off of when Mark was talking about the radio comm scene where Lion-O is running Mandora. I think in this episode they really allowed the characters to kind of like show more emotion than in a lot of episodes. Like when I was listening to it, I could really hear the panic in Lion-O's voice when Mandora was, or when they were about to unscrew Quick Pick, that she was kind of panicked. You could see her panicking. Yeah. And
did we lose you?
Yeah, sorry, just a second. My microphone was acting a little funky, but yeah, I just really like how they allowed the characters to show a lot more emotion. I really liked the idea of the gray prison planet, just the idea of like an entire just like artificial planet with its own like fabricated orbit is just so cool for me. But beyond that, I think Marm and Mark here have pretty much covered everything I've had to say about the episode. It's just a good episode, probably one of my personal favorites from season 1.
All right, so I'll go ahead and give my thoughts, and then I'll read the manual. All right, so first and foremost, it is an enjoyable episode, of course. I like the fact that the characters, or the character in this episode that's working towards reformation, actually worked towards reformation. He didn't just say, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to cry about it a little bit, and then they're like, it's okay, you killed all these billions of people. No, it was just a petty thief who is actively trying to be better. And a couple things I find humorous is, number one, when Mandora is having issues and the rest of her evil chaser cohorts are gone, I think it's funny. It's like, all right, so I'll talk to the buff lion person on that random planet I met once. He's going to come help me. Like, that speaks to Lion-O's character. She knows if I tell him I'm in trouble, he'll show up with that crazy magical sword and fix everything.
Let me find that big old himbo's number real quick.
For the love of Pete. But also, I like the fact that it's like, I made copies of the keys. You know, for reasons. Just throwing enough doubt in, why did you make copies of these keys? It was really well done, and the idea of how they'd get control back in the prison was also really well thought up. Well, if we throw the thing out of orbit, what are the prisoners going to do? They're going to go back to where they know is the safest, in their cells. So that's how we're going to recapture these people. Really well thought out. I remember when I was younger, we got like some coloring book based on it. So that's also why it sticks in my mind. But I thought it was a really well done episode, both in writing, characterization, and in animation. But I'll go ahead and read this off. This is, of course, done by William Overgaard, who does some more of the crazier ThunderCat episodes. Anyways, controversial writer Bill Overgaard always walked a fine line between enhancing the series with his vivid imagination and obscuring its key elements. Unfortunately, Mandora and the Pirates represents the first time he fell wrong on that line. Ooh. Perhaps the most noticeable difference between this outing and a standard ThunderCats episode is that it's set up in deep space, without the regular landmarks of Third Earth, Cat's Lair, or indeed any prominent featured ThunderCat besides Lion-O. The episode seems out of place and, as such, uncomfortable. This need not be a fatal flaw in itself. Indeed, it could be argued that Mandora and the Pirates is very similar to Overgaard's subsequent and greatly superior adventure, Sword in a Hole. Even the plots of the two are similar. The ThunderCats are being attracted into space by deception and encountering a space menace. However, while Sword in the Hole will feature a credible pathway to space in the shape of the ThunderCats feline or spacecraft, the episode's method of Lion-O riding into space on the back of Mandora's electrocharger is nonsensical and ludicrous. Overgaard's usual talent for character development also seems to desert him there, and Captain Cracker falls into the category of generic pirate. Given that the series also had featured a renegade pirate in the form of Hammerhand, it is said that Cracker is the inferior of the two in terms of characterization. Even the plot isn't Overgaard's finest, with many scenes seeming to lack direction. Ultimately, it's the story of an interplanetary police officer pursuing a criminal in space. The ThunderCats, i.e. Lion-O, really have no place in the story, and as such, it would have been perhaps suited better to Silverhawks. Despite this, the episode isn't without merit. Overgaard's trademark device of disposing of the Sword of Omens throughout the episode so that it can't be relied to resolve the plot has to be commended. Lion-O walking a space plank is an original idea, and Mandora's fate hanging over the pot of boiling oil is particularly gruesome. The reappearance of the Quick Pick character, albeit rehabilitated, is also welcome, and Cracker's trap to attract Mandora with a series of traffic offenses is ingenious. Ultimately, episodes like Dr. Dome Tome proved that Overgaard could deliver a script that stood in contrast to those of his fellow writers and still get away with it. However, to do so this successfully, the story had to be a strong one. On this occasion, it wasn't. Here's a script commentary from Peter Lawrence. Producing a show like this on a very tight schedule and with a much smaller crew than competing shows, we worked hard to exploit existing elements, designs, concepts, secondary characters, and so on. Bringing back Mandora was a pretty easy decision, and rekindling her fiery relationship with Lion-O equally obvious. My memory is that in the first draft, their exchanges were hotter and more suggestive. Nothing distasteful, but witty and sharp. I was asked to cut them back and did so, but without much enthusiasm for the task. The episode demonstrates Bill's great sci-fi, sci-fantasy in imagination, with its space milieu, autonomous Harley, the prison itself, which I now realize might have sparked the prison from Monstar's escape to kick off Silverhawks, the orbital break, what a great cartoon animation idea. And then, just when the story seems to be rolling around conventionally, Bill throws in Lion-O's walking the plank. I completely understand why so many of the straighter Lion fans did not, and do not, care for Bill's flights of fancy. Many viewers want their stories and their characters to be somewhat predictable, the drama and surprise contained within a known world. The ThunderCats always behave in a certain way, Mumra has his MO, and so on. And every episode needs a shake-up, and Bill Overgaard's stories play into that role perfectly.
It's interesting to hear how critical they are of the episode in that book, because I don't know, I guess we were all kind of agreed that we loved it, so I'm surprised I guess as the creators they have a different insight on it. But regarding all the comparisons with Silverhawks, I never had a problem with, Lion-O breathing in space or Lion-O falling in space when he walks the planet, because that was stuff that was in Silverhawks, and I guess I always assumed the shows were in like the same universe, and that's just how space worked in that universe, is that you can breathe in it and you can fall in it. That's just outer space in the ThunderCats, Silverhawks, and I guess Tiger Sharks universe. So it never really stood out to me as being a problem.
Yeah, and personally, if I was a helm of writing a new ThunderCats, I'd probably tie Mandora directly into the Silverhawks continuity because of the similar idea, similar concept, similar execution. But I think they are tied because I know they were up until the end they were planning on some sort of three-way crossover called Thunder Force that included all of them. There's only one production image from that, but I believe they're all technically within the same universe, but it would take more digging to find concrete information on that.
The 2011 series, even though that's a separate continuity, they started hinting at it, as part of like Mum-Ra's menagerie of weird shit in his spaceship. But
yeah, I remember they gave
that's a different topic altogether.
Yeah, they gave a nod to Monstar on the main screen and one of the Tiger Sharks. So that series is a mess. We'll get into it maybe at a later date.
Yeah, if I could butt in for a second, I swear, it seems like the other staff on the show just had something against Overguard. Because, I don't know, their stance in the comic that, the Thundercats should always follow a certain formula, it should always be in kind of like a safe zone, if that makes sense, with like distinguishable landmarks and stuff like that. I honestly feel that kind of crippled the series. Like, I loved episodes like this, but that were more out there, that were, in deep space or on different planets and stuff, because it's something different and it's refreshing. And I think without episodes like this, the series would have become really stale really fast.
Exactly. It's one of those things where it's nice. I wouldn't want ThunderCast to be like that all the time, but every once in a while, it's really, like you said, it's really refreshing. It's like, the 2002 Teen Titans cartoon would always have like a designated comedy relief episode each season where they do something wacky with like Mad Mod or some character like that. Not every episode was like that, but like one episode a season was like that, and you always kind of looked forward to it. Been like Batman the Animated Series and the new Batman Adventures, Paul Dini would write a comedy relief episode like in each season, like Joker's Millions or episodes like that, and they're just a fun change of pace. I like Dr. Dome Tone. They mentioned that in the book, and that's a really good episode. I wouldn't want every episode of ThunderCast to be campy like that one was, but it's nice to have it every now and again.
Since there are like 30 standard cartoon plots, like everybody has trouble with Tribbles episode. If you can shake up the formula, that's great. That I think that helps your series stand out.
All right, so a couple things in the chat. Weren't the Silverhawks able to survive space due to their cybernetics, and the Thundercats able by the magic of the Eye of Thundera? I think the Silverhawks, their cybernetics gave them the ability to do certain things in deep space. I believe breathing in space is common in the Ronkin Boss productions, and more characters than just the Thundercats could do it, so there's no evidence that the sword had anything to do with that. Even Mandora rides around on her electrocharger without any sort of breathing apparatus. Captain Shiner did the same thing. You see incidents of, I think, other characters doing it as well. My mind's kind of out to lunch on that, but I know there's a lot of other examples of other characters breathing in space. Heck, the planet or the Valley of the Snarfs from Thundera, when Thundera blew up, they survived just fine, literally in the void and darkness of space before the planet reformed.
I feel like Batman did it in Super Friends. Sorry, Couch.
No, you're fine. I just kind of always assumed that it was just kind of like a plot armor thing, which, you know what, I'm willing to give them a pass for that.
Oh, this episode had two things that I forgot to point out that I think I made a note on. One was that this episode was aired out of order because Lion-O at the beginning says they don't have any sort of interstellar spacecraft, and this episode aired after Feeliner, so I feel like it takes place before Feeliner. Also, it's another one of those episodes that has one of those sly references that reminds you that Third Earth is the planet Earth in the future, because Quick Pick says when he holds up this cape, he said it was given to him by the Caliph of Venus. You know that they're in, our solar system, the Sol solar system. That's one of those little references where the show never outright said that Third Earth is Earth in the future. It was just kind of like they put these references in that expected the audience to put the pieces together on their own.
Well, that, and I think I recall reading that and I need to find a source for this, obviously. They planned on going over it, but they thought it might be a little too dark that it's a post-apocalyptic, post-humanity Earth. Real quick here, for Bill, he wants to be creative, yet the creators pass him off as a failure. I don't think it's that they pass him off as a failure. They clearly note that he is a creative individual. It's just that he had his flaws, like all writers do. And while some writers were more fond of keeping the Thundercats in certain ways, Bill had an unfortunate tendency of going a little too far into absurdity, and instead of just working with the characters he was given, just creating brand new characters for whatever bizarre plot he made. And sometimes that works. With characters like Hachiman and Mandora, that works fine. Characters like Captain Bragg, we could have done without. Just could have done without them.
Yeah, he's kind of doing the thing that like 12-year-olds on a DeviantArt do with their Sonic OC. He's like, oh hey, look, I made like 50 of them, but I didn't really do anything with them.
Original my character, do not steal.
This is my Sonic OC Captain Bragg. Do not steal.
This is Balonic. He's a completely different character than Sonic.
Captain Bragg.
We should probably save that topic for when we talk about Dogs of War.
Oh,
God. Yeah.
All right.
Shit.
Going on to Return of the Driller. Who wants to cover that synopsis?
Ooh, pick me.
All right, Couch, I'm picking you.
Okay, so the one thing that I really, really like about this episode and the character of the Driller in general is that it is so rare in this cartoon that we get a character that is, excuse me, completely neutral. Like, okay, the Driller, yes, he refers to Mum-Ra as his master, yes, he follows Mum-Ra's orders, but in the beginning of the episode, we have Mum-Ra offering him diamonds, and the Driller explains the reason why he needs these is because if he is not able to sharpen his drill with these diamonds, he will eventually, it'll get dull, he won't be able to move, and he will be stuck under the earth for all eternity, I believe are his words. So not dead, just trapped in his own body. And while, I mean, yes, he is following Mum-Ra's orders. Yes, what he did is technically evil. He's not doing it because he wants to destroy the Thundercats or whatever. He's literally doing it so he doesn't, get a fate worse than death.
Correct.
If I could add about that scene, I think it's an incredible piece of writing, because I think his Mum-Ra's line to him is, "You like diamonds, don't you?" And the Driller's
I don't die.
yeah, the Driller's response is, "It's not a matter of like or dislike." And what I love about that is it's a thoughtful way of saying it that adults can appreciate, but it basically explicitly explains to children that Driller is a mercenary, that as Couch said, that he's doing this because he has to do it, because that can be a difficult concept for children who just think of good guys and bad guys. Like the concept of a bad guy who's doing it because it's his job might be fresh to really young children, and they explained it well.
Also, can I just say I love how Mum-Ra says the word jewels and diamond. It's not jewels, it's jewels and diamonds.
Well, so regarding Driller, I like that he has such a good track record. I mean, this is his second episode, but so far, every episode he's appeared in, he's gotten the job done. Mum-Ra's given him an assignment: kidnap Panthro, fill a hole from Acid Lake to the lair, and he does it, and he succeeds. He does his job, and he does it right. Mum-Ra loses, it's because Mum-Ra had a flaw in his plan. It's nothing to do with Driller. Driller gets the job done. That's why I don't like the episode Jackal Man's Revenge, because that's the one that just seems where like Driller's out of place. Like he's teaming up with Jackal Man and Mole Master to take over Third Earth, when, as everyone pointed out, he's a mercenary. He's neutral. He wouldn't want to take over Third Earth. He also fails in that episode.
Look, man, he had to respond to the Third Earth Craigslist ad. All right, he got to do it.
Right. And no, maybe I guess taking over Third Earth means more diamonds, but I guess we can save that, I guess, when we get to Jackal Man's Revenge. But I just don't like that episode because Driller doesn't succeed, and it takes down his GPA, and I feel like he deserves better than that.
What's wrong with you people? All right, so what are your thoughts on the episode itself there, Couch?
Overall, it was very much an average season 1 episode. They didn't really go outside their comfort zone with it, but I still liked it, mainly just because the Driller was in it, and for once we actually get to see a villain, or I don't know. I guess he would be classified as a villain, even though he's neutral. We actually get to see them get the job done. I also appreciated the sponge fog, because I remember seeing that in like the little map from the comics, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if that actually appears in the show. And then lo and behold, there it is.
They also did a nice bit of world building in this episode, introducing the new super fuel. And I like that they introduce it with the comedy bit that Panthro straps the engine to the table and promises that it won't leave the table, and then the table just goes flying around and crushes everything. But they introduce something they can use later in the series too, an alternative to Thundrillium.
Correct, even though they really didn't wind up using it later.
Yeah. I was wondering, is this the only episode where the super fuel is actually mentioned? Because I remember season 2 episodes where they're trying to find Thundrillium.
I think it was. I think maybe there's some inference that could be made that, you don't see them doing much of it after season 1 and the opener to season 2. So maybe the super fuel just kind of added to their supply and made it to where they didn't have to look for it as often. Who knows?
There is one consistent thing in this episode that actually stuck with, is that the Thunder tank is awesome, but it's only powerless when it's upside down like a turtle. That's a plot point in this episode, is that once they're underwater, oh no, the Thunder tank's upside down. Ah, damn it, our one weakness.
Wait till I get right side up, sucker.
So I actually have a long memory with this episode. The first time I saw it as a little kid, the only part about it I remembered was Snarf making applesauce, because he was making applesauce on the stove. As a little kid, I always assumed applesauce was always cold because it was a refrigerated snack. Like, you make applesauce by boiling it? That's so weird. I was like a 6-year-old, that blew my mind. So applesauce was the thing I remembered about this episode.
Snarf be roughing it, yo.
They burn the applesauce at the end. And then that's the other thing. It's like, this isn't the first time applesauce appears in this series. During the Lion-O anointment trials, doesn't Snarf make applesauce for Lion-O and says it's his favorite snack?
Yeah,
so that is consistent. Yeah, Lion-O likes applesauce. Good for him.
Just
Eats a lot of pork.
Giant man holding like a tiny applesauce cup and like,
Look, okay, Couch, I don't need to be called out like that. I don't appreciate that.
I both consume applesauce and like drink out of little juice boxes.
Capri Suns are the best.
I like juice.
Yeah, just to stick with the applesauce topic for a second, just you guys tell me if your parents told you this. Whenever we would have like pork chops or ham steak or something, my dad would always have applesauce as the side. And he told me that if you eat pork, you get parasites, and applesauce will kill the parasites, and that's why you eat applesauce with pork.
What?
Oh, my parents.
No.
Okay, I think my dad was insane. All right.
Okay, yes and no.
My parents, no. That is really funny.
My mom told me that grilled cheese sandwiches were Spider-Man sandwiches to get me to eat them because it was a picky eater. And I love Spider-Man so much I choked him down. I'm doing this for you, Spider-Man.
Was it because like the cheese came apart in strings?
I just hated all foods when I was like 4. So my mom had to tell me a superhero had specifically instructed me to eat this food to get me to not starve to death.
Sometimes it's okay to lie to children, because their applesauce and their grilled cheese sandwich.
Slightly off topic. I promise this will be short. When I was a small child, I really, really wanted a puppy, as most kids do. My mother did not. So we went out into Amish country one time, as we were in Ohio at the time, and she's like, "Oh, honey, if you see a sign that says free puppies, we can stop and we'll get you one." I'm like, "Okay, mama." So we're out in the country, so naturally there's gonna be like 50 of them. So every single time we drove past one, she'd be like, "Oh, look, Couch, a hawk." And I'd look out the other window and be like, "Mama, I can't see it." She's like, "Oh, you missed it."
Wow.
Oh, brutal.
This is the same woman that told me, "Oh, you don't want to watch Pokemon because they hurt animals on that show," because she didn't want to buy me the cards.
Y'all are starting to make my childhood sound normal, and that's got to stop.
Parents are devious.
I mean, it wasn't as mean as her just saying like, "Oh no, you can't have one."
No, my old man would just be like, "You can't do that. Why not? Because I said so." Well,
Yeah.
all right then.
That was the other answer, but whenever I tell someone that story, they just die. But yeah. Anyway, back to ThunderCats.
All right. So actual
My
thoughts
other
on the episode.
memory, I'm sorry. My other memory of this episode is actually more recent. When I was doing my ThunderCast rewatch, earlier this year, I don't know. I think I had food poisoning, and I actually left work early and came home, and I did the thing you do when you have food poisoning is I drank a lot of water. I forced down some like carbohydrates. I just laid in my bed with a massive headache, like chills going over my whole body, and a stomach ache. And I just put the episode on, and so I was just listening to the episode while I was in agony on my bed. So I associate this episode with applesauce and pain. This is the painful applesauce episode.
Painful sauce episode.
Yes, that's how I recognize this episode. But okay, that's all I really have to say about it. The rest of the plot's pretty basic. They go to get some sponge fog. They fight some monsters. They get the sponge fog home, and they plug up the hole. That's it.
Okay.
I like the inventive bit where they put the sponge fog over their head as a shield. That's just like a nice little crap.
Oh yeah.
Our tank can't
Like a
solve
mattress.
the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I sent you guys a reaction image I saw in this episode. I don't know if Lio can put that in the stream somehow, but it's got a couple goofy faces in it. And
Yeah, Snarf did have a lot of that's crazy. Snarf did have a lot of really crazy anime faces. Like the episode even ends with him being like, "Snarf, Snarf, I burned the applesauce," and then he makes like a really like goofy face in the very last second of the episode.
I also thought it was oddly specific that they have giant mechanical insects that are mantises, and there's literally a robotic insect exactly like that in Samurai Jack. Like you just always wonder, I wonder if some kid growing up watching ThunderCats ended up on the staff of Samurai Jack, or if they were just like they were just smoking the same imagination crack or something.
It's the imagination.
There are a lot of robotic insects in the show in general. Like there's the Technopede, there's the Firebug, I think it was called, and then there's the, what do they call it in this one? It's like the Mechanopede or something. I had a name for it.
Also, real quick, gonna address the chat. Tim, I don't know why you had this obsession with versus battles whenever we're doing anything, but we don't know what type of metal Driller's made out of. It could be a space metal. It could be a mystical metal. That doesn't necessarily mean Toph's going to be able to mess with it. Welcome to multiple different versions of reality and how they may not interact well.
But his tip is diamond. That's the only thing we know about.
Diamond! All right, anybody have any other thoughts about the episode?
I'm good.
All right.
Yeah, I think
I enjoyed the episode. I thought it was an interesting little romp. I always enjoy seeing the Driller when he's properly utilized, so I don't have too much to say off of that, just creative use of problem solving. But anyways, Return of the Driller, written by Howard Post. In his second and final episode of ThunderCats, Howard Post was unable to recapture the originated first appearance of his character Driller in Spitting Image. Unfortunately, while the Driller seems to be an adversary, his appearance here is just as brief as in his debut, and the viewer is still left wanting more. Bizarrely, the few scenes that do feature the title character are almost identical to that of his previous story, as he once again visits Mumra's chamber. The idea of an acid lake flowing underground and imbibing or ebbing even closer to the cat's lair is an interesting one, and it's a nice device. Sadly, Post's background as a comic strip writer comes through here, and an abundance of inconsequential subplots are littered throughout the episode. These include attacks by rockmen, mechanosex, and a giant worm. Giant worm! While this type of plotting suits the nature of an episodic comedy strip, it seems a bit choppy in a series like ThunderCats. Other ideas, like the sponge fog are used to plug the hole, are a little silly, and the thin plot is stretched to its limits. There are admittedly plenty of exciting moments, they just don't fuse together as well as this viewer might like. It's nice to see ThunderCats tackle an environmental subject, and the idea that nature can be very bit as devastating as Mumra and the Mutants works well in the series. Post also creates some effective dialogue and cleverly uses Mumra to great effect. "How very charming! What a tranquil scene!" he rants. "The ThunderCats romp and play unmolested on my planet. I shall soon put an end to this frivolity. Be gone, foul image!" Yes, I know people don't like the word used there, but anyways, Spitting Image certainly stands out as Post's best contribution to ThunderCats, and it feels as though an opportunity to develop the character of the Driller was missed here. Nonetheless, an unintended consequence is that the character would become one of the most mysterious villains ever to grace the series. He had writer's commentary from Leonard Starr. Don't remember how he did only 2 episodes of ThunderCats, and I don't remember what he did for work up until his final illness. His death was a terrible shock. He attended my retirement party years back. He'd written a poem for the occasion and read it when we cut the cake. That's just sad. Like, that wasn't even about the episode. He just really misses his friend.
That's just messed up, yeah.
Anywho, moving on to the next subject here before we get horribly depressed. Let's go ahead and talk a character retrospective. A character retrospective of the Thundercat character Claudus, who is Lion-O's father. So let's go ahead and throw 3 images and hub them up on the screen. So who wants to go and talk about Claudus first?
I really like how Lio had an opportunity to go back and encounter his father. I mean, this is one of the maybe like strongest parallels between Lion-O and Kal-El, is that both of them have a planet that's destroyed, and both of them have kind of a complicated relationship with their father, where their father is a sort of key inspiration to them in becoming who they are. So I like that he in that one time travel episode, I like that he had an opportunity to meet his father, and they had that almost sort of mysterious conversation where his father wasn't entirely convinced it was Lion-O, yet I don't know, it seemed like he seemed to accept, well, maybe you could be my son, so I'm going to impart to you some wisdom. And then Lion-O basically has to grapple with his father's not quite death. So I don't recall exactly how they explain it in that episode. That is he like trapped in one of the spirit dimensions or something? Is how they explained it?
No, not quite. His dad got captured right before Thundera exploded by a villain called the Shadow Master and kept in the Shadow Realm.
That's it.
Okay. Shadow Master. God, his voice is so annoying. but that's for another episode.
Yes, go thank Peter Newman for that one.
Yeah, I don't blame the guy. He had such great range, but I could imagine having to voice like half the characters on the show. You run out of ideas eventually.
Yeah. That's one of the things I liked on the show, is that when they ran out of ideas, they just started doing celebrity impersonations. So you end up with characters who sound like, I don't know, like Groucho Marx for no reason, just because they're like, shit, I'll just make this guy Groucho. But we're talking about Claudus. I'm sorry. So Claudus, he's interesting. He also kind of brings up an interesting thing about Lion-O, is that Lion-O was like, what, 10 years old at the start of the show when he left Thundera. Is that correct,
10 to 12.
12?
Yeah.
Okay, so he was 12 years old, but he says later on that he has like no memory of Thundera. That's he doesn't remember. He just doesn't remember it, which is weird. You know, at 12 years old, you should be able to remember what your life on. But maybe that wasn't a side effect of the capsule malfunction or whatever. But that also means that he doesn't just fail to remember his life on Thundera. That also means he doesn't remember his father very well. So the episode when he goes back in time to the time capsule and he meets Claudus and he meets his father, it has a little more like heartfelt impact. Is that his Swiss cheese memory is missing all these like important moments with his dad. So he's getting to basically see him again and get reminded of who his father was. And says, I don't know, there's something really strong about it, but it goes unsaid, I guess. That's kind of one of the things I like about ThunderCats, is a lot of the stuff doesn't get directly, they don't come out and say like, this is my father. I don't remember him very well, but it's nice to finally see him and rekindle my memory. Instead, it's more implied. That actually makes it a bit more powerful. Claudus as a character, I felt he's the one character where I thought was actually stronger maybe in the 2011 reboot, because he got more to do. We got to see him die. We got to, Larry Kenney voiced him, and I remember that was really exciting in 2011, hearing Larry Kenney come back and play Lion-O's father in this kind of like passing the torch moment. Mm-hmm. The original series, he's only in a couple of episodes, and they're very good episodes. He's just kind of like Lion-O's father, who he meets when he goes back in time, and then he meets when he's trapped in the astral plane. That's kind of it. He is an important character. I mean, in Return to Thundera, they point out that he stayed behind to protect his people. The flagships were leaving, and the one that had the Thundercats on it had a busted hover landing jet, and so he had to stay behind to make sure it got out safely. So you know his nobility, you know how much he cares about his people. That he is the captain of the sinking ship that is the planet of Thundera, the last one to leave, not leave at all when the planet's about to blow up. So he's a very honorable individual. And for a character who only appeared in a couple of episodes, to have that much characterization says a lot about him.
All right.
Yeah, he's a good character.
I'll go ahead and go next here real quick, because then I got to step out for just a moment, and I'll have you guys continue talking before I read out the character bio. But I like the fact that you, in his first appearance in Return to Thundera, you find out Claudus is a war veteran, who the reason why he had to pass the torch to Jaga in the interim is because he lost his sight. You find out in Shadow Master that he used to be much more jacked, much more authoritative, and did not stand any sort of nonsense. But you also find out later on in the Origins comic, he used to be really arrogant. And one of the reasons why he's much more tempered as he got older isn't just the age, but also because he had to do some unpleasant things. He had to kill his own father during the anointment trials, because his father was about to start a genocidal war. So while that doesn't play into the original series, because it can't, go back in time 20 years, I think it can tie in properly with the character. Claudus is much more quiet, much more reserved, and there's a reason why him and Jaga were friends for that long, and why he trusted Jaga with the mantle of Lord of the Thundercats, even though it was, genetic or heretically his, is because he was a similar demeanor. And I like the fact that he doesn't back down. Like when he's a physically impaired individual, but they never once play him as weak, which is something that a lot of cartoons had a tendency of doing, or making them the butt of the jokes, and Thundercats played that straight, and I appreciate that. I find Claudus to be a good character. I just wish they would have expanded a little bit more on him. So I'm going to head out for a few minutes. I'm going to keep the stream running. Please entertain our guests, and I'll talk more about Claudus till I get back.
So, what do you guys think about Israel? Not just kidding. This episode, Mark ruins everything.
I was going to do the politics joke too. I'll just note that you went straight to Israel.
Lyle can't leave us alone for 5 minutes and everything.
Right, yeah. Okay, come on, guys. We got to reel it in for a little bit. I'll expand on Lyo's point with Claudus changing his demeanor because he kind of got a wake-up call from his father. I almost kind of wonder if maybe that caused him to treat Lion-O differently. Because in the 2011 series, Claudus, for lack of a better term, he's kind of a hard ass when it comes to Lion. Like, he's very critical, very harsh on him. But in the 80s series, he's really not. He's encouraging. He always tells Lion-O how proud he is of him. And I think maybe that's because of people like his father. Like, he didn't want the same thing to happen to his son.
He's very different between the series, but that is a good point when you look at, like, chronologically the character development of Claudus between the different mediums. Everything was that Lion-O, as he's portrayed at the start of the series, I mean, he's 12 years old, but he's portrayed as kind of a frivolous young lad. Basically, is that he's not very mature at first, and maybe some of that is due to Claudus's coddling of him. No, he's certainly not bringing him to heel and kicking his ass and making him work hard. It could just be because maybe that's the way he was. He was very arrogant. He was very tough, and he overcame that and became kinder and gentler. That might be why he didn't kick Lion-O's ass into shape when he was 12 years old. It is a little strange. He is very kind and sweet when we meet him in contemporary time in ThunderCats, and Lion-O just doesn't seem like he was trained to be a badass king or in Lord of the ThunderCats at all. At least
he's a good boy.
He's just a sweet young boy.
Yeah, I thought I read somewhere that Lion-O is a master of the sword. I don't know if I read that in one of the things that Lyle Convoy sent me. So I feel like Lion-O picks up the sword and starts hitting. I guess it's this fine line, because like the tough guy dad obviously pushes you to go farther and farther, and the supportive nice dad is a bit more of a friend and maybe like gives you less, I don't know, like less need for therapy.
Yeah, I mean, so Lino, he's obviously when we first see him for that brief period of time in the first episode when he's a kid, certainly not athletic. He can barely pick up the sword, so he's obviously not been sent through a whole lot of physical training. He does have the emotional and spiritual merits of being a leader. It's like when he has a sword, he says, "You shall not have it while I live." Oh, so he's got. I think Claudus probably imparted on him more of it means to be a Lord of the Thundercats at heart, maybe not so much physically. It actually kind of like lends to Claudus because Claudus Jaga, the Lord of the Thundercats, while he was king and he ruled by heart and wisdom and intelligence. But perhaps he valued that more than physical brute strength. So that could be, if you're looking into it way too deep and you're coming up with all your crazy fan theories, that could be why Lionel was
Snakes,
like a wimp
gulags.
as a kid.
I just really like. I'm noticing Lio's stream, and I just really like the different beard styles that Claudus has over time. Like he kind of a young face like Lionel, but a different. I'm really interested in the hairstyles because they're all, I don't know, like anime like in the sense that they have a distinct shape, and yet all of them are somewhat cat-like, I guess. Like they're trying to evoke the idea of the ears in the shape of the hairstyles.
Yeah, I think the first one, which is the youngest version of him from the comics, I believe, I think was just kind of, I don't know, maybe a product of its time. I personally don't really like it because it looks a little dated with the best way I can describe is like the Final Fantasy looking hair.
I was gonna say Cloud from Final Fantasy VII. Yeah, that's kind of what he looks like.
Yeah, I think that was more because I can't remember exactly when the Origins came out, but I feel like it was after 2000, before 2010, when that art style was extremely popular.
Yeah, that everybody wanted to draw like Joe Madureira at that time, and it kind of like rubbed off, especially at Wildstorm. Yeah, I mean, looking at those different versions of Claudus, like the intermediary version, he kind of looks he's got like tigra hair almost. It's not like he's trying to do that. I wish the old man Claudus. I want to see the Captain Lou Albano era of Claudus when he had the rubber band around his beard. If that existed.
Brother.
Groon, I want you in the ring, Groon. We're gonna take you down.
I'm gonna do it.
Kecker's Boy has an interesting comment. He says, I'd say that him not being able to lift it was symbolic of not being strong enough to lift the burden of leadership, but he does actually lift it in the episode when he needs to prove he has the responsibility. Interesting.
That is I think that is definitely what they were going for, was that he's not there yet, but he has the potential within him. But he only holds the sword aloft for a second to scare off the mutants, but then, it shrinks again. And then as season 1 goes along, he basically, that's Lionel's character arc throughout season 1 that ends with the trials, which I always assumed the 5-part Trials of Lionel were the season finale of season 1. I know that they aired like sequentially, like one episode per week, and so they're all kind of out of order in the broadcast. But whenever I watch the series, I always watch that 5-parter as the season 1 finale, because that kind of feels like that's the culmination of everything Lionel's learned throughout the season.
Yeah, the production order is really weird. You think they would have like rejiggered it and said, okay, now that we are going to put this on YouTube or something, this is our chance to put these things in chronological order, right? Like TV schedules were weird back in the day.
No, and so with the Trials of Lionel, the Anointment Trials arc, remember when they rerun it on Toonami, they actually did air the 5 episodes together. I don't remember if they aired them as the season finale for season 1, because I couldn't check that stuff back then. But they did like rearrange the order so that the 5 episodes were together instead of apart. So at least the people at Cartoon Network were, aware enough to put those episodes together. I wish the DVD people were, as observant.
Well, they don't even get all this. They don't even get all the sound effects in.
Yeah, when Lio pointed that out to me, now I can't stop but notice it when I watch, like, I think it's episode 2, the Evil Alliance or whatever it's called, the Unholy Alliance. Like, yeah, that one's missing all of its sound effects. Like,
yep, that was a production issue.
On back.
Correct, that was a production issue. And according to the chat, yes, 2011 Claudus was unfortunately made to be a special supremacist. There were a lot of problems with the 2011 series, but another discussion for another day. Has everybody else gotten their thoughts about Claudus out of the way?
Yeah,
I think so.
All right, so here's what the book says. Claudus was the former lord of the ThunderCats prior to the destruction of Thundera and is Lionel's father. In his youth, he was a much beloved ruler of the ThunderCats' homeworld, and together with his royal friend and warrior Jaga, defended the planet with the aid of the Sword of Omens. Claudus was blinded in an attack with the Plundarian mutants, and was later willing to sacrifice himself to oversee the launch of the spaceship that would take his son and the ThunderCat nobles to safety under the protection of Jaga. Claudus debuts in the Season 1 episode Return to Thundera, when Lion-O is able to travel back in time and meet his father. After the destruction of their planet, it was presumed Claudus had perished. However, the second season episode Shadow Master reveals that he had survived as a prisoner, the titular character. Traveling to the Shadow Realm, Lion-O frees his father, who ascends to the astral world where Jaga resides. In his script for Return to Thundera, Bob Haney described Lion-O's first view of Claudus. Lion-O's father, a ThunderCat of noble leonine type, middle-aged, powerful but blind, an elder carbon copy of Lion-O. We see now his noble sightless eyes staring off. Alright, so now that we've covered Claudus, we get to get into the pain. Who's ready for the pain?
Yeah.
Here we go.
I gotta ask a question. Is there such a thing as a good ThunderCats comic? Because all the shit we've been reading is just terrible.
Star.
There are. Some of the Marvel stuff is really good.
And let's do some of those next time, because I can't take much more of this.
Star comics are so good.
All right, let's power through Dogs of War. Is a 5 was it 5 or 6 issues? Can't remember which.
It's 5 issues, so I guess we're gonna go 2, 2, and 1, or 2 and 3. I don't know.
Let's shorten our pain and do 2 this time and 3 next time. Agreed?
Okay.
All
right, so throw them up on screen. All right, so Dogs of War, the synopsis is this is probably about 2 decades after the return, and a bunch of dog people invade the planet for reasons, and the ThunderCats have to fight against them, and they enlist the help of previous enemies. And I'm going to let Couch have her giant soapbox to rage about, because I promised her that. You're on.
Thank you, Lyle, for the privilege. So, I know when we covered The Return, I said some good things about it. I explained, I like the art style. I didn't even inherently dislike the concept. I just didn't like how it was executed, blah, blah, blah. I have nothing good to say about these two. They, honestly, for these 2 comics, they would have been better off completely retconning The Return and starting fresh. Because I could be wrong, Lyle, feel free to correct me if this isn't the case. I think what happened was Wildstorm released The Return. They got slammed with backlash, because I remember a lot of people when I was digging around on some old Angel Fire sites from when that comic came out, people were furious about it. And I think then when Dogs of War came in, they tried to dial it back a bit. They did, I don't know if anyone here or in chat is familiar with the Danganronpa series. They kind of tried to do the same thing there, and where the first game was very, very dark, and then they tried to make it more lighthearted with the second game, and just like in Dogs of War, it just didn't work. You can't do that. You can't do a story like The Return, where a main character gets killed off, other characters get traumatized, their entire planet gets torched, and try to, cleanly wrap it up with a happy ending, like how ThunderCats episode should be, and then follow it up with a lighthearted story like Dogs of War, acting like nothing happened. You just can't do that. It doesn't work. And as far as my ripping and tearing goes, that's kind of my main criticism of it. I'm going to just go out and say I don't really like the art style or the, mostly just the, I don't know if it'd be the pencil guy or the inking guy. A lot of the characters look really off model. There was the whole thing where with Wily Cub and Wily Cat, who are apparently the children of Tigra and Chitara, which completely retconned the plotline of Panthro and Chitara being a couple in The Return. I'm going to give someone else a chance to talk. There's another issue that stems from the return. I see those F's in chat when I mentioned character death. I think that was a shout out to the return episode we covered. But yeah, I'll expand on that more, because fun fact, Bengali dying actually causes a lot more issues in this comic than you would think, but it's kind of more down the road from issues 1 and 2. So I'm gonna let someone else take center stage. I think I said my piece.
Okay, may I talk? I want to. We're all in a hurry to complain. I know.
That's the most I've ever said in one of these episodes. Oh my god.
Oh, and no, Dogs of War. It's like it had idea of an race of dog people to fight the cat people, and the dog people are led by a guy named Dober Lord. It sounds like something that could happen in the 80s series. It's like they almost had a premise that would feel authentic to ThunderCats, but they had to run it through that early 2000s grim, dark, everything reads like a 13-year-old's fanfic filter that they had at Wildstorm. And I mean, it's didn't feel any better than the return. I mean, if they were trying to course correct from the return, I just couldn't see it in this miniseries. I mean, it had all the same problems. You have like the Robert Burbles, who were like the Ewoks of the series, the cutesy characters, getting violently slaughtered by the dogs.
Oh, it doesn't count because we're
chopped
showing robot parts.
Yeah, right. But then like Overlord's like wife, the queen, comes in and she's got blood on her hands and she's licking the blood off her fingers. Like, oh man, that's so badass. Oh, she's licking the blood off her fingers, dude. This is so hardcore. This isn't your daddy's ThunderCats. This is badass hardcore ThunderCats. And, oh my god, like what fucking 12-year-old wrote this shit? It's just so. It's everything that was wrong with the return is wrong with Dogs of War. And I guess we can talk about this part more when we do the last stretch of the miniseries, but this is technically the end of the continuity, because all the Wildstorm miniseries that come after this take place like previously, they're like prequels. So this is where the continuity ends. I personally don't acknowledge the Wildstorm comics as my ThunderCats continuity. I only recognize the cartoon, but whatever.
Me neither.
It's just it's really bad. Brett Booth, I mean, Brett Booth's art is quintessential 90s Image Comics Wildstorm arts. I know he worked for Jim Lee, but it's that every page looks like static pose. The characters are always looking at the reader. It's a pinup. Even when they're fighting, there's no kinetic energy. Everything just looks so static and so slow, and like nothing's happening. Everyone's posing. It's so, I don't know, it drove me crazy reading these issues. It was like, oh my god, is anybody moving? They all look like they're pre-posed mannequins. I couldn't get into that. Just didn't like a damn thing about it. I mean, the ThunderCats He-Man miniseries we last time was bad. There were at least elements of it that I could enjoy or appreciate. I could try to find one little nugget in there that I liked, but this, like, there's just nothing to it. And you know, you pointed out, Couch, that so why do a cheetah and a tiger have kids? Those kids are wildcats. It'd be like if a black guy and a Hispanic woman, if a black guy and a Hispanic woman had a kid and the kid was Chinese. Wouldn't make sense. You know, you probably one of them cheated. I don't know which one cheated, but either Tigra or Chitara cheated, because those kids are wildcats. Well, I mean, they're completely different race.
It better be the cheetah.
You're the cheetah. Oh yeah, Lionel's got the jokes.
I think it was explained that their names were supposed to be a tribute to Wily Cat, even though Wily Cat was a traitor and Chitara gets mad at him later. Like, I don't know, man.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I totally forgot that Wily Cat, that was the big grim dark thing, was that he betrayed the ThunderCats and they thought he was dead, and he comes back in this story. That's another storyline, is that he comes back. But the continuity is so selective on this. It's like, takes place the first page says 15 years later, so it's 15 years after the return, and you see Lion-O, and he's this grizzled old man with a beard. He's got a lot of gray in his beard. He's old. Then when they show Pumaira, she looks exactly the same as she looked previously. She's still young. like some characters age and some characters don't.
There's
They
everything
hand
was
waved it.
bad.
They hand waved it by saying that Lionel's time in the Book of Omens has
Oh, I
affected
forgot about that.
permanently affected his aging process, which is a little weird because you think they'd like that's the kind of thing where that would be a cool idea if the TV series talked about it. But if you bring it up after the TV series, you're just going to raise questions that make the TV series seem weird now. Because why do they use it if it's that dangerous?
There's more issues here. I'll go ahead and touch on. Then I'll let Marm go. All right. First and foremost, you have disjointed logic here. Just from the outset, yes, they are ThunderCats, but that doesn't mean dogs are the enemy because cats. No, they're big cats. No dog is going to be an actual threat to a tiger or a lion. I don't care how big the Rottweiler is; it's going to die. If you here's how I would have restructured this. I wouldn't have used the dogs of war because I personally believe it's been denied on page, but I personally believe there is some basis for the 80s on this because there was, and I'll get into this later. I'll show you at the end of this a prose story in the 1989 annual from the UK comics called Thunder Dogs, and they're canine characters that Mum-Ra puts on Third Earth to try to undermine the ThunderCats. But we'll get to that later. But this, you want to know how to make Dogs of War 100% better without being completely asinine? You change the Dogs of War to Plundarians. You change them to mutants. There's been God knows how many years of peace, and the mutants have decided to finally attack New Thundera. Boom! 100% more consistent, 100% more sensible. It doesn't step out of the reign of what ThunderCats is. They were used by Mum-Ra during the return. Why not have them come back? That makes more sense, because they have more beef historically with the ThunderCats than the mutants do. Now I'm going to go a little bit further here. It makes absolutely no sense that the Sword of Omens doesn't warn Lion-O about this. This is a massive threat. It's a planet-wide threat, right? Sword is completely silent. Go ahead.
Chitara's sixth sense is the one that warns her about it, right?
Yeah, but it's really vague, which her sixth sense has been, but not to that extreme. When you have a threat...
She thinks it's Wily Cat, yeah.
Yeah. When she had a threat this big, it's always a sword that warns them. But even going further past it, we have Lion-O. Well, I'm going to announce my retirement. I'm feeling very old. He's been aging 5 years for every one. Okay. He talked about the last time they had to deal with the Mum-Ra or the mutants was a decade ago, maybe more. So let's say at the absolute most, 20 years. I think that's reasonable. What do you guys think? That would mean... Go ahead.
Oh,
the comic says 15 years, so I guess 15 years since the return, so unless he's done something in there.
Go ahead, Couch.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. I thought they said 15 in there somewhere, but I feel like they waffled on it a lot, so I don't know.
All right, so that means Lion-O is approximately, let's say he was 30 at the end of return. That means he's 105 years old. Now,
old boy.
To all of us, that sounds old. Jaga was so old that the only other characters older than him were Mum-Ra, and Mum-Ra and Hachiman are the same age, and Jaga met Hachiman when he was younger. ThunderCats lived to their thousands.
Good point.
As a matter of fact, something Mum-Ra touches on at the very last issue of this episode of this entire abomination. You ThunderCats are a long-lived beasts. It's like if you live to your thousands and you're 105, you're still in your prime, boy. It's just nonsense. It's just inconsistent, stupid writing. Now, I do have one thing I would like to say in the positive. I do like Brett Booth's redesigns of the costumes. They don't hurt my feelings. I'm also going to go ahead and put this out here. The way Pumaira is drawn also doesn't hurt my feelings, just being honest here. But that's the only positives I can give you. I like pants on the characters, but that's the only positive here because the characterization's bad, the writing's bad, the conceptualization's bad, the new villains are bad, edgelord garbage. That's all I had to say about this. Does anybody have anything else they want to chime in on?
Sure. I guess so I don't hate it as much as ThunderCats He-Man, I guess. So I think I've been so anti-spoiled on bad ThunderCats comics that I actually enjoyed this one in comparison to the others. I basically agree with the criticisms that have been offered. I like how stupid the idea of dogs that are the anti-ThunderCats is. That's the kind of idea that would make a great cartoon episode, but you can't do a serious threat with it. Like, save the dumb ideas for the really dumb, fun, short adventure stories, and then I actually really like the idea of making it the Plundarians, because the Plundarians feel more like an ancient, supreme enemy
Yeah.
race to the
And
ThunderCats.
I only have a vague memory, but in one of the later issues, Jackal Man says that he and the Dogs of War are cousins, like the Dogs of War are offshoots of the mutants or something, but I might be misremembering that.
I think the cousin is more implied because he's a jackal, that he's part of the
Yeah,
dog
I
family.
guess that's it.
Mark had the comment that Brett Booth kind of has a traditional like indie comics Wildstorm style, sort of super, not like the Image Comics superhero books. I like that he pays attention to the models more than whoever the artist was for He-Man ThunderCats. He just made up whatever he wanted them to look like, basically sometimes. And you can tell that Booth is trying to model the Rankin Bass style in like Snarf's eye. Snarf's eyes stood out to me, but it's not like he doesn't draw well enough in it to kind of like convincingly capture the Rankin Bass style. I feel like we need to lean into the fantasy aspects to get the feel of ThunderCats, and maybe a little less of the 90s superhero aspect.
Yeah, I feel like everything looked a little too like kind of gritty and like a little too realistic. Basically, they did the thing that I don't like in a lot of comics, where they try to make it it's realistic looking, but then they like mess up all the body proportions, so it just goes in uncanny valley territory.
I mean, his style didn't match a lot of, I think, what was on the script. Like the first issue opens with the new Thunder Kittens getting into zany hijinks and wacky, like they're riding their hoverboards around the castle and they're getting into some sort of like mischief. It's supposed to be like childish and fun, but his art style just didn't lend itself to that sort of tone and humor. I don't know. It just it didn't tessellate.
I agree.
I absolutely hated the slaughtering of the Robear burbles, because that's too much like ha ha ha. Look what we're getting away with. Well, in the episode we talked about earlier today, Mandora, they implied torture and like taking off Quick Pick's arm, but he's a robot, right? So no harm done. He could put his arm back on, but it's still like telling kids that evil people are evil. With you got to tell kids that evil people are evil, but you don't do it in such a way that you traumatize the kid forever. And I feel like Robert Burble gut splattering everywhere. That's in the trauma direction. Like if it was something like they knocked out a Robert Burble and its head fell off, and then at the end they put its head back on or something like that I could get behind, right? That feels like it would still be kind of like within what the established tone of ThunderCats is. Yeah, and I guess there are dinosaurs. There are dinosaur people in the ThunderCats universe. Dinosaurs are always cool. I always like dinosaurs.
Yeah, I didn't mind the Saurians. I thought they were pretty cool, actually.
They also introduce a new character in this. I mean, I forgot completely about him, but then I see him in the background of the page is Bobcat. So he's like a member of the Palace Guard, and he has a crush on Wily Kit. Have like a little like back and forth while they're fighting off some of the Dogs of War, but it's one of those really cliched back and forth where she's like, I can handle myself. I'm like, this is one, and it's like, but I can handle myself. It's all right, really, really cliche dialogue there, but okay.
Bobcat. I also really, really hate the name. They just call him Bobcat.
Right.
They could have called him Rufus.
That's not even a quip. That's just Bobcats just exist.
Call him Boba Cat.
No, just should have called him Robert Cat. Robert Cat's a great name.
No, what they could have done, if they wanted to be smart, they could have called him Rufus. Why? Because Rufus is part of the scientific name of a bobcat. Just use your brains.
You put more thought into that than the writer did.
God, my brain hurts. I hate this book, and we're going to go into more why next time. But here, I want to go ahead and put this on screen. So let me go ahead and remove, I'm sorry to see you go, Attracted Pumira, but I'm going to have to remove you. Let's see here. There we go. We go ahead and add this new thing. New dogs. Add source. Alright, so in the late 80s, the UK ThunderCats comics, which I need to finish collecting because there's like 100 something of them. But they had a short prose story written by, doggone it, Simon Furman, of all people, who's somebody that Mark might recognize.
Yeah.
And this is how they were designed for the Pro story. And they were about a group of anthropomorphic dogs that were supposedly going to undercut the Thundercats by being the real heroes of Third Earth. Basically, Mum-Ra was planting, threats for them to take care of before the Thundercats would show up to undermine the Third Earth residents from trusting the Thundercats over them so he could take over and yada, yada, yada. But they say there was no inspiration here, but I'm kind of questioning it because the leader's name is Rex and, Doberman, so yeah. Why they gotta look like that? Because that was the art style at the time.
The leader kind of looks like a really bizarre mix of, Shrek, Thanos, and Homer Simpson.
And now I can't look at this ever again.
Oh God, that
More
I can see
humanoid.
all three of them in there, and it's really bothering me.
Also, I really
Yeah,
like
I
the one.
did-
I really like the one with the red cape and his tiny little flail.
Yeah, right. Like he's just gonna give you a love tap at that. Like, oh, be nice, tap.
It also bothered me that in the comic, the dogs of war have literal dog heads, and the Thundercats have humanoid heads with vaguely cat-like features. I don't know. It's a hard balance to strike, but they went just straight for let's make them dogs.
Let's make them giant, even with the reverse legs, the backward legs. That makes tons of.
Yeah, the werewolf legs. What's that called? That's called
Chicken?
Oh, there's a word for that. It's called drunk term. Remember?
I can't remember either, but not that.
Well,
it
when your
matters.
heels touch the ground, that's called plant grade.
Digigrade.
Digigrade,
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you. Digitigrade legs. Yeah, I call them
I'm a
werewolf
furry, I
legs.
know what
Thank
that
you.
is.
They always ask werewolf. They never ask why wolf.
Yeah.
All right, so
I
with
mean,
it- go ahead.
No. Marmaduke brings up a good point. Is that these characters you just showed us, Lino? They look more like they fit in with the Rankin Bass Thundercats aesthetic as anthropomorphic animal characters, whereas the Dogs of War, they don't. They look like a product of their time, I guess. They just don't fit in with the style guide. This looks more authentic. And that one second from the left, I don't know. He looks like buff version of Dobby from Harry Potter.
Dobby is now free elf. Dobby gets to the gym every day.
Yeah. Take my sock, motherfucker. That's how you do it.
Master has given Dobby the gift of Planet Fitness membership.
All right, so if we got anything else to say about this, let's go ahead and start talking about what we're going to cover next week. We go ahead and pull up the episodes we're going to cover. Let's see here. Is everybody enjoying the 2-episode format as opposed to the single one?
I like that. It just gives us just enough to talk about.
And I mean, we'd never get through the whole series if we did one episode at a time. So 2 seems to be working really
It
well.
would take us like 5 years, but we could do it. All right, so
Yeah.
Dimensional Doom and Queen of 8 Legs.
Ooh, that's a good Snarf episode.
Yes, it is.
It's a low-key good Snarf episode.
I'm excited for Dimension Doom because it's one of those episodes where I do not remember what happens at all.
Handsome Egyptian man comes through Chitara's mirror.
Oh, it's
Yeah, that's
that
like one of the-
Okay.
Yeah, that's the Wizra episode,
Yes.
which, let's get the laughs out of the way, Wizra, haha. But that's the one that's got some low-key sexual tension between Wizra and Chitara. There we go.
All right.
And yeah, of course the Egyptian guy's a furry. Egyptians were the first furries.
Don't
It
you
makes
start
sense.
that. Don't you bring that evil into my house. No, sir. All right, so we've covered a hero this time, so we have to cover a villain next time. So what villain should we cover next time?
All of the mutants.
Not all of them at once. We can't do that. And no, we've already
but-
covered. We've already covered Jack. We already covered Vulture Man. So no, Mark.
Oh, can't we just cover Vulture Man every episode? Just have a Vulture Man segment.
Oh God.
And we did
So
Slide,
who-
I remember.
Yeah.
We did Slithe
Yeah.
and Vulture Man. What mutants have we done? We haven't done Monkeyan, and we haven't done Jackal Man, I guess.
Jacqueline.
I think we've done Jackal Man.
Oh, yeah,
but
Jackal Man.
It was a while ago. And of course, there's also
I
more
wasn't there.
There's also more villains than just them. Like it could be any villain.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just nice
Wait.
to have them as a complete set, you know?
It's just we haven't gotten to some of the villains. Like we're a long ways away from the Lunatics. So I mean, I don't know if we want to talk about the Lunatics if we haven't gotten to those episodes yet. I don't know. Have we talked about like Hammerhand and the Berserkers, or do we want to wait until Hammerhand comes back with his new Berserkers? I don't know.
Well, if you want to round it out, we could do Monkeying.
Okay, yeah, let's talk Monkeying.
And we'll be done with the main mutants then, right?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
John asked, can we do Zach's? I don't know. Do you want to see a New Yorkan villain out of nowhere in deep space? I don't know. He seems kind of odd for ancient Egypt.
That's the kind of shit I love about ThunderCats, man. I love that. Yeah, just like for some reason, the ancient Egyptian guys get a New York accent. That's what made ThunderCats great.
I got 4 arms. You know what? If I had to do that show, I would have him revoiced by the same guy who did Karl Branatanalewski.
Yes.
Hey, Mumra, where's my car?
Nothing matters.
It doesn't matter. None of this matters. Where's my other 4 arms? I need them for things. Get your mind out of the gutter.
That's what I mean. It's like we pointed that out at the beginning of the episode, is that as the series went along and the same 5 voice actors were just running out of ideas, they just started doing like weird accents and celebrity impressions. So like, why does the guy who goes around capturing criminals sound like W.C. Fields? Why does his bird partner sound like Groucho Marx? That's just like, that's all we can do. The same thing on the 80s Ninja Turtles cartoon. They had, because that had a really limited cast, and it had like 200 episodes. There's a point where like they had so many generic mad scientist villains who are only in 1 episode. They got to a point where just each mad scientist character would just have a different celebrity voice impression. There's one who sounds like God damn it, what's his name? He's a black guy from the Rat Pack. Oh, yeah, babe, that guy. You know what I'm talking about, but he sounds like that for no reason. And there's like another character who just sounds like Howard Cosell, the NFL announcer. Just for some reason, this mad scientist talks like Howard Cosell. And the pass is caught by Daryl Green for a touchdown. He just talks like that for no reason.
Good lord.
I don't know. I love that shit. When the voice actors just have to make shit up on the fly, it's great.
All right, so we've got those things covered, so let me go ahead and...
Emmy Davis Jr. That was his name.
Okay. Let's see here. Where'd I put it? The old man didn't know where to put his thing. Oh, there we go. All right, so let's go ahead and get that going. We thank you all for joining us. Appreciate you guys being on the stream. I'd like to thank our supporters, Comic Basics, and my backers on Patreon. If you'd like to, help me going and help keep this channel up, feel free to go to Patreon, especially considering right now I do not have a job. I'd like to thank my co-hosts for, again, being part of this, and we'll see you guys next time. Go ahead and say your goodbyes, guys.
See ya.
Thank you all.
I hate Wildstorm.
We all hate Wildstorm. You'll see me again on Monday, where I'll have my friend Kier on for an art challenge. You got something to say real quick, Couch?
No. I just said me and my homies hate Wildstorm.
Me and my homies, they do. They hate Wildstorm. You guys take it easy.